Welcome to the Simple Sophisticate podcast, where intelligent living is paired with signature style. I'm your host, Shannon Ables. And whether you're listening on your commute, exercising, working in the garden, or sitting down with a hot cup of tea or a café au lait, thank you for tuning in. Let's get started. Welcome to the 222nd episode of the Simple Sophisticate. We are wrapping up the third annual French Week here on the Simply Luxurious Life, which embodies the Simple Sophisticate podcast. And I am very excited for today's guest. Before I get into our conversation, I want to kind of give a backstory as to how we finally connected and happened to have this interview. So today's guest is Oliver G. from the Earful Tower podcast. You guys may remember back in September of last year, so episode 175. His podcast was the petit plaisir of that particular episode. That's when I was first introduced to the podcast. He kicked it off in early 2017, and I have been listening ever since. He is now on his fourth season, and we're going to talk about that in our conversation, as well as just everything about the Earful Tower, what it's about, and also get to know Oliver a little bit more. In fact, I'm going to ask him a question that I've been curious about since I've seen him on Facebook and in his Instagram feeds. It has to do with something that is almost, I would say, as famous as his podcast is becoming. And he shared with us that might have been the first time someone asked him that question. And he has a great story to share with regards to that particular question. But very quickly, to the backstory of how we finally connected. So as you guys know, I was in France this last June and July, and he and I had tried to connect to actually meet in person and tape an interview conversation. Well, I had a busy schedule. I was very rarely in Paris, and he is located in Paris. But at the same time, he is getting ready to have a wedding. He's getting ready to be married. In fact, when I speak to him today, he will have just married his lovely wife, Leena, the weekend before. And anyway, we did not connect, and I hope to get back to Paris sooner rather than later so that I can have that face-to-face conversation, a walk and talk about the city, as I think would be a lot of fun. Anyway, we're going to get into this conversation with Oliver G. from the Earful Tower podcast. Stay tuned at the end of today's episode where we'll do a bit of a rundown of this week's French Week, as well as talk about wrapping up season 4, which we are, oh my gosh, and heading into season 5, because we're going to mix things up a little bit. So stay tuned at the end of today's episode. But now to my conversation with Oliver G. Joining me today on the Simple Sophisticate podcast as we wrap up the French Week this year is guest Oliver G., who some of you may already know. He is the host of the Earful Tower podcast. Welcome to the show, Oliver.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
You are about ready to venture throughout France because you just got married. Congratulations is in order. And how are you doing?
Well, yeah, thank you for the congratulations. I'm doing very well indeed, weighed down by a golden ring on my finger that I'm not very used to, but I'm getting used to it. And things are smooth sailing as I'm getting ready for the honeymoon, really.
I want to first talk about your podcast, The Earful Tower, because I came across it last summer, I believe, and I introduced it to my listeners and readers here on this podcast as a petit plaisir. You've described it, I believe, as something that is you figuring out the country of France, because you came in 2015. What were you expecting? You arrived at a very tumultuous time in Paris's history. What brought you to Paris?
You have certainly done your research, Shannon. So it's you got it exactly right. I came in 2015, and it was the day I arrived in Paris was after the attacks on the Charlie Hebdo satirical newspaper. So I came at a really tough, rough time, a really difficult time for Parisians. And I came here to work as a journalist. which I did for about 2 years, and it was a very heavy job. There was a lot of terrible news, a lot of horrific news, terror attacks. There were plane crashes, a lot of terrible times for France when I was working as a journalist. And after a while, I sort of gradually realized that I enjoyed doing more entertaining and informative stuff than the journalism, and I started this podcast on the side. And as it sort of grew in popularity, with thanks to people like you who were sharing it in the early days, then I was lucky enough to step away from my day job and focus on this as my main gig. So that's where we're at now, and I'm just I'm giving it my all, because it's still early days in the world for podcasts, but it's what I want to do and it's what I enjoy doing, and there seems to be an appetite for it out there.
There definitely is an appetite. There's definitely an appetite for France, but your energy is infectious, because it's like, as you said, you expressed what you seem to enjoy, but that comes across. It is sincere. You have this curiosity about the country you're living in now, and I appreciate that. One of the things that I find entertaining when I'm following you on Instagram is the different historical, I don't know how to describe it, historical artifacts or history that you learn about the city on your tours. Where does that come from? Tell me a little bit about what you've discovered.
Well, thanks for following on Instagram. I think personally, I think I'm one of the worst. I think I've got the ugliest Instagram pictures of everyone in Paris sharing pictures, because
they're real, though. They're real.
Yeah, that's true. That's what
are polished.
There's a lot of people that are sharing admittedly brilliant pictures of croissants and cups of coffee and the Eiffel Tower, and I sometimes do that myself. But I don't know where it came from, because I was never a massive history buff. But as I do this podcast and interview interesting people and learn from them and read books that the authors have written who are my guests on my show, I find myself being more and more intrigued by the city of Paris. And then when I find something like the artifacts you mentioned, so I guess maybe you're referring to how I'm currently obsessed with the remnants of an old city wall that used to surround Paris 800 years ago. When I go out and see parts of these walls as I'm walking around, I really become addicted to finding them and taking pictures and sharing them and telling the story of, for example, tracking down this wall. And I don't know if your listeners will think that sounds really boring, but it becomes this weird kind of obsession for me, and I want to find out more. And the pictures may not be beautiful, but there's a real genuine interest on my part behind the things that I'm discovering. So yeah, I guess it comes across for people like you that follow.
Well, it just reminds us to pay attention to those little details, because a lot of times people just walk right by those doors with those beautiful, unique knockers. Or what was it? The one I guessed at one time when you were asking everybody what it was on Insta stories, I think it was a boot scraper. It turned out to be, but I thought
that's right.
But those are the things we just walk right by. Yeah. We don't pay attention.
I know. Yeah, it's true. You're right. You're exactly right. And another thing that I've obsessed with, and my poor, I was going to say girlfriend, but my poor wife now has had to suffer. She's had to suffer for a while. But this other thing I was massively obsessed by were these things that are called chasseroux. Chasseroux. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but they're essentially these stone guards to stop wagon wheels from bashing into the side of the walls when the wagons would go in, however many 100 years ago. And when you look around Paris, there are these sometimes really ornate and beautiful kinds of little protectors against the doorways, and they're all different colors, shapes, made of iron or stone. And like you said, everybody walks past them without realizing. But me, I scour the city and I find interesting ones. I often tell the people I'm walking around with about them. And a lot of my Parisian friends have said that they had no idea what these things were, or even that they were there. They're just the kind of things you walk past without even realizing. And they keep me awake at night just thinking about them, Shannon. I got to be honest.
They keep you. I love it. Well, if that's what keeps you awake at night, that's not a bad thing. That's kind of neat, actually. And speaking of your guests, I've listened to a lot of different ones from the mayor. I think you're the mayor from the Marais on, or one of the arrondissements in the Marais. You've had authors, as you said. You've also had comedians and artisans. I'm curious, and I know this is kind of a Sophie's choice. You don't have to go there, but what was one thing a guest brought to your attention or made you see or learn that you didn't expect?
Oh man, that is a tough question, and I don't know. I think it's weird what comes to my mind first out of all the guests I've had. But there was just a random example is I had a guy on who it was kind of weird. He's got an Instagram handle, Deserted in Paris, and every day he takes a picture of his shoes matching with a different French pastry, right? So like he has hundreds of pairs of shoes, and I just thought it was really cool. It was going really viral, and I got him on to teach me about pastry. And I'm not a massive pastry and everything that's, everything from croissants to the most fantastic shaped and colored things I don't even know the names of. And I remember when he came on, I kept saying, I remember I asked him all these questions like, where's the best croissant? Okay, where's the best pain au chocolat? And he was kind of like, you're not getting it, man. There's a lot more to it. And I remember when I listened to it back, it sort of really opened my eyes how much pastry there is in Paris that I didn't even, I had a really basic opinion on it. And that's, so then when I was going into shops afterwards, I was kind of looking for the things he'd mentioned. And that was just, that's a really random example, but it's like that kind of thing. I have no, anytime a guest is on, I let them know, and the listeners know too, that I really am using this podcast to figure out France. And it's very often that I don't know something that might seem obvious to the guest or to anybody, but I learn about it and I eat it up quite literally when it comes to things like pastries. So, that's the kind of example that of something that I learned that I didn't expect to learn.
Well, and I think that's what's appreciated. You're coming at it with that honesty. I don't know, and I want to know. And for a lot of us, maybe we wouldn't have the courage to ask that question, yet we don't know the answer. And so we would like someone else to ask it for us. So thank you for doing that.
Hey, you know what? Like, I noticed that somewhere, like, kind of later in life, I wish I'd thought about it when I was a lot younger, that when we don't know something, it makes such a world of difference to just ask, even if you look stupid. And as I realized that as I got older, it changed my whole life. And now I'm really unashamed to say, especially on the podcast, but in life as well, like, oh, I don't know what that word means that you just said there, or I don't know what a pain au chocolat is. And sometimes people will give you a hard time about it. And they'll be like, oh, what you like? It happened to me today, actually. Someone said to me today, we're talking about a bakery. And she said, oh, it's a Meurph bakery. And I said, oh, I have no idea what that is. And she said, you don't know what a Meurph bakery is? And I said, no, I got absolutely no idea. And she goes, are you a foodie? I said, well, I'm not even a foodie, but please tell me what it is. And so I learned it's this kind of bakery that has, it's been awarded. She said it's like getting an Academy Award for a bakery. It's one of the best in the town. And once you got it, you wear it forever. And you can see these little signs, MOF, out the front of the bakeries. And I was just happy to learn something new,
You just taught us something new. I'd never heard of that. That's okay. So MOF, yeah. Just look out in the window.
Yeah, I haven't fact checked that one. So don't chase me down if I get it wrong.
It's on air, and we'll double check it all. But that's good for you for not letting her, her little comment stop you from continuing to figure it out what it was. That's awesome. No, I think that's a great idea, and it isn't easy. But I think the more you do it and say, I don't know, the easier it gets, and you just, like you said,
it's really refreshing to say it. I love it. I wish I did it even more. It's like, plus even something that you think you've known your whole life, and then people can explain it to you better. It's wonderful. I wish if I had a motto, that would be it. Ask when you don't know.
Just ask the question. Say, I don't know. I don't know is the best thing you can say, and then you'll learn something new. That's a good advice to students. And I always say to my students, there's no wrong question, obviously, because if you don't know, you don't know. And how are you going to know what you don't know unless you ask? And I think it speaks more of the person saying, you mean you don't know that? I think that's really more of a reflection of what it is than anything. But
exactly. I hope that woman's not listening to your podcast.
If she is, I bet she just wanted to engage with you in conversation. So
yeah, perhaps.
I want to talk about your red scooter because it's becoming almost as well known as your podcast. I want to know the backstory. How did you I know it's just a scooter, but how did you acquire this now famous red scooter that's in your pictures and on your illustration?
Yeah. You're right though. It is. Today I was walking out of a cafe in Paris and there was two women with these fancy big cameras taking pictures of the scooter just parked up front of the cafe.
That happens a lot now.
That happens a lot. And it happened today. I went to talk to them and I said, what are you doing? They said, oh, we've got a travel magazine or something like that. And it's just really, it's a really eye-catching scooter. And the story of how I got it was a gift from my now wife, Leena. And it was pretty amazing actually. So we'd been down in Nice and we rented scooters, like kind of Vespa scooters, and I really loved it, and I was really pumped to buy one for myself. And Leena, and I was telling Leena and her family, I was like, I want to get one of these scooters, and they were all putting me off it. They said, "Nah, you don't want one of these scooters, not at all. That's not for you. It's so dangerous." And I later found out that was because Leena had been planning to buy me one anyway. Yeah, I don't think anyone's asked me that one before.
Speaking of you two, you're going on a tour of love, basically, is what you're calling it. But it's going to be in a heart shape, tentatively, literally a journey, a heart shape through the country of France. Whose inspiration was it? And tell me a little bit about where you're going to begin.
Right. Okay. So the heart shaped journey, I think, was Leena's idea. All good ideas come from Leena on the Eiffel Tower. You can put that in print. I don't mind. She's got a great mind for this kind of stuff. But so it's like a Tour de France, but of love. So we called it the Amour de France, which has a nice little ring to it too, I think. And it's in this, like you said, it's in this love heart shape because obviously it's a honeymoon and it's got to be romantic. And the idea, I mean, how it kind of worked is we had a big map of France and we thought we're going to take this scooter on a trip, and we put down like sort of dots on the places that we really wanted to go. And a lot of it was sort of coastal places, and, starting in Paris and peeling off up to the northwest and then going down towards the Riviera and then back up again on the eastern side. It just sort of made this natural heart shape, albeit quite an ugly heart shape. But the idea was there. And then we thought, what if we just try and mold the trip to be in this kind of heart shape altogether? And that became the idea. And it's just Leena and I love doing traveling and road trips. We drove from New York to LA last summer, and it was brilliant. And we had deadlines and we had to be back obviously in Paris, so we just did it over 4 weeks or something like that. But for this trip, because the apartment that I'm sitting in right now that we're renting, someone bought it, and it means we have to move out. And instead of being discouraged about not having a home to come back to, we thought, well, let's just take our time on this honeymoon, and rather than go sort of day by day and stay in different places for one night, we thought, let's just take it easy and really explore France without a sort of deadline to come back to in a rush. So
good for you.
Yeah, I'm really excited, and the idea is basically really vague and spontaneous. And every sort of week or every 10 days, there's going to be a sort of base where we aim for, so that we can give people a bit of a heads up. So, for example, we could say, like, hey, Shannon, if you want to meet us in Bordeaux, we'll be there around this time. You know what I mean? Just so, because some people want to meet us, or some people want to, family and friends want to come and spend a weekend with us in some places. So we have to have a semblance of a plan, but really it's quite vague. And I think the beauty of it is, if we're traveling along past, let's say, Mont Saint-Michel in Brittany, and we find a beautiful little town that's off a side road somewhere, we can go and spend a night or two there, and we can, I don't know, meet the mayor, and we can do whatever, like, and interview them along the way and do videos and do podcasts. And in case you or your listeners are thinking, what kind of honeymoon are you going to be doing podcast on? It's also the only real way we can justify doing it for so long, is because the podcast is my job. So in an ideal world, we can just keep doing it as long as people are happy to keep subscribing to it.
Well, and Leena's an illustrator and an artist and a designer. Am I remembering that correctly?
Exactly.
So she's in the arts as well. So she's deriving a lot of inspiration from this trip.
She's way more creative than I am, and she can work on the road. She designs shoes. She does a lot of like the illustration and stuff. That's more of a hobby. But I think she'll be doing some illustrations and some prints from the trip as well. But yeah, the beauty of being a shoe designer is you can design a shoe in Brittany as well as you can in Paris or in New York or whatever. So we have that luxury as well.
That's a wonderful luxury to have. Yeah, I did see on the earfultower.com, you have a list of the first few areas you're going to be in. So you guys are heading north to Normandy first. Is that right?
That's right. It's actually, it's really fun. So we've got, the way it's worked out, so a lot of the listeners to the show, I don't know if I still don't really understand it, Shannon, why they do it. I think, I know they like the show, and I know they want to see it succeed, and they want us to have a good time. But they've been like overwhelmingly generous with offering. For example, on the first night we're staying in Chantilly, And there's a listener to the show who has it's sort of like a really charming Airbnb place that she rents out. And it's this Irish woman, and she just contacted me and said, if you need a place to stay, that's yours for a night or two, So I said, I didn't want to impose, but I said, yeah, I'd love to start the trip in Chantilly. And then just like literally before you called me right now, another listener from, I think she's in California, she contacted me and said, listen, she said, I stay in a lot of hotels around the world, so I've got essentially frequent flyer points built up for hotels. She said, if you want a hotel somewhere, you just let me know. And I said, well, I'll tell you right now, we're going to be going to Giverny right after Chantilly. And then she just messaged me back and she said, yeah, I've used my bonus points to get you 2 rooms in a nice two nights in a nice hotel in Giverny. And I was dumbstruck by the generosity and thoughtfulness of these people. So yeah, like we're going to get this chance to just travel around and sort of see things like that. And people sort of become involved like that on the way.
That's fantastic. And you guys, like I said, you're going to be out there for about 6 weeks, but that's not necessarily concrete. And I think as we're wrapping up, it's funny because when I was in France, some of my listeners and readers said, Shannon, who else can I follow? Because I want to continue to travel in France and you're going home. Well, guess what, guys? You can follow Oliver and Leena because they're going to be going around the country for quite some time, right?
That's right. I mean, I have a strong feeling it'll be longer than 6 weeks as well. But I wanted to ask you a question, Shannon, because I know you were studying in Angers. Is that right?
Angers, I studied that years ago. Oh my gosh, Oliver was like 18 years ago. But yes, I did. That's where my first experience with France was.
Well, then I was hoping that you could give me some kind of recommendations. At least, is it worth swinging through there on the way?
I haven't. The last time I went through actual city was when I was in school, but I actually was in that area. I was in Le Mans last month, and then I was in the Amboise. Weren't you in Amboise? Is it Amboise?
Yeah, I was. How do you remember that? That's amazing.
I don't follow too many people on Instagram. Otherwise, it just overwhelms me. But I always wake up to France. Those are my Instagram followers. Right. You guys are so far ahead of us that when I wake up, that's what I follow. But I know someone in Amboise, or how do you say it, Amboise?
I think it's Amboise, but I'm not 100%. Okay.
With all the castles.
Yeah.
Anyway, if you're nearby there's a fantastic, and I'm going to put a post up, actually, by the time this airs, it'll be on the blog, the Chateau Villandry. It is the largest vegetable garden associated with a chateau that you will ever see. It is
the largest vegetable garden associated with a chateau. That can't be hard though, Shannon. There can't be many vegetable gardens.
It is. I swear, it's bigger than the grounds of. It's bigger. I don't know. It's larger than a football field times 3 or 4. But they have beautiful showings at night with the lights, and it's just so peaceful. And the monks. It's inspired by what the monks did in their garden. And so you have this. Anyway, if you want a little bit of a respite as you're going through there with all the chateaus, I didn't even go through the chateau. I just said, I'm going to go through the garden.
Definitely, if that's even vaguely on the Love Heart outline, then I'm going to check it out. That sounds really cool.
Okay. But yeah, it's the chateau region. But, there's so many gorgeous places in France. You guys are just going to come across some magnificent treasures. And I think that's the fun part for what you're doing. You're getting out of Paris. We all love Paris. It's nothing against Paris.
Right. I think that's if there's a complaint, or I don't know if it's a complaint, but feedback I get a lot that people don't like about my show is that it's Paris focused, and people say there's a lot more to France than just Paris. And I give them season 4 is all outside of Paris, so I hope that will silence the people.
Well, and they'll be able to go, for those that do want your Paris, they're going to be able to go back through the previous seasons. And I think a lot of people will see that you've done that very well, but now you'll have the country and then you will come back. But like you said, I thought that they would say the opposite, actually, when what you just said. I thought they would say, get back to Paris.
Well, I'm interested to see if that happens as well. And if that does happen, I'll just figure that you can never win. But on a personal note, I'm like, having lived in Paris for 3 or 4 years now, I'm like humongously intrigued by seeing the rest of this country.
And go to the markets. Go to all the markets. There's a market every day somewhere in your area, wherever you guys are.
Right.
That was what was fascinating. You already know this. I'm telling you things you already know.
No, that's not true. But you mean food markets, right?
Yeah, the open air food markets. Yeah. That's what I think I miss the most. One of the most things I miss the most is you can always go somewhere to get fresh food. You just can't go Sunday afternoon.
Right. And what's the food that you recommend I get out of everything?
Gosh, well, you're going to be there in the fall, right?
Yep.
So pick up all the apples and the pears. But I don't know. I've never been in there in the fall, Oliver. So you're
Okay.
gonna have to tell us.
I
I've
tell
been
you,
in
I
the
tell
summer.
you, now that I know that you're a big Instagram user, I'm gonna absolutely shout out an apple or a
Oh
pear to
yes.
you.
And
So
then
you can grasp it.
show me a tarte pomme after you guys. Anyway, no. I would love to see what's in the fall markets because I did what was magnificent about the summer ones is we were down in Vaison-la-Romaine, and the season for asparagus had already passed, so there wasn't any. But the strawberries obviously were right there. You have the zucchini blossoms, but those are almost out of season, and the white beans are almost out of season. So they were trying to scurry to get all those things before they go, and it was kind of like this fantastic competition to get as much of the good stuff before it leaves. And I was like, that's the kind of life I want to live. The best.
Yeah, that sounds nice. That sounds nice. Chestnuts. What about chestnuts? When are they?
I've only known about them from the song "Roasted Chestnuts Over an Open Fire." I don't know. You'll have to tell me.
Don't worry. That's what I'm here to do, Shannon, and I will do that.
Good. All right, Oliver. I just want to thank you for joining me on this podcast and joining us for French Week.
Hey, thank you so much. I'm honored to be part of French Week.
Yeah, and you guys, as we are airing this, you guys are already on the road. You're heading out on the 15th, right?
That's right. So when will this get aired on what did you say, 18th, 19th?
18th or 19th. So it'll be on the weekend, the wrap up of the week. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I'll be in Giverny and heading onwards. So all you listeners who are hearing me for the first time, join the fun and I'll see you on the road.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And listeners, you can visit his website to get all of the episodes from previous seasons at the earfultower.com with Oliver G. Now, to check out Oliver's website, his podcast, visit the show notes, thesimplyluxuriouslife.com/podcast 222, and I'll have links to not only his podcast, but also his Instagram feed that I was talking about throughout our conversation. And if you want to support his podcast, by doing that, all you have to do is subscribe to Patreon, pay a minimum of $5, $10 a month, and he provides behind-the-scenes videos of his trip, of his honeymoon throughout the country of France that are only available to Patreon supporters. So that link is all on today's show notes. You can check it out. I am one of those lucky people behind the scenes getting to watch the videos, and it's a lot of fun to see Oliver as the narrator and to see France, to follow along and see more of France. Now, the good news is French Week is not over yet, guys. It's the 18th, and we're going to the 19th. And believe it or not, there have been 20 posts or podcast episodes. So there's been 2 podcast episodes this week, 18 posts that we began last Sunday. And if you haven't entered already, we have 3 giveaways this week. And you need to make sure you entered by today, the 18th at midnight Pacific time. The links to all of these giveaways and all these posts are on the show notes for today's episode, or just simply go to the blog right now. And if it's August 18th, you'll find all the posts filling up the homepage of the Simply Luxurious Life. Just click on any of those and you will find the links to the giveaways. Now, the winners, all 3 of them will be announced the final post of French Week, which will be the 19th, Sunday, the 19th in the afternoon. There will also be some extra bonuses for anyone who did not win the giveaways. There will actually be some exclusive discount opportunities that are open for a short amount of time that you don't want to miss. I was very thankful for the companies for offering this to everyone, only to the Simply Luxurious Life readers, and only for a short period of time. So you do want to stop by tomorrow afternoon, Sunday, the 19th. There will still be another post Saturday the 18th. I'm going to share with you a recipe. And tomorrow, I will also be sharing with you one other post besides the roundup. So 2 posts today, including this podcast being one of them, and tomorrow 2 posts as well. Now, I briefly mentioned at the top of today's podcast episode that I was going to talk about the 4th season, which we're wrapping up, and how we're going to kick off and go into the 5th season. As you guys know, we have done 222 episodes so far. There will be 223 by the time we wrap up season 4. That's over 52 episodes a year since we started in September 2014. And I want to thank you guys for tuning in so regularly, because it has been so much fun to put all these together and bring on more and more guests as the seasons roll on. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to have one more episode in this season, which will be this Monday. In 2 more days, you get to have another episode. And that episode is going to be entirely dedicated to getting back into the swing of work, of school, of the regular routine, making sure we're prepped and ready and excited to go so we have a strong fall going into this new season. So that's what our episode's going to be about this coming Monday. Then on the 27th of August, there won't be a new episode, but what will happen is on the blog on the 27th, I'm going to give you guys a very detailed calendar of the 5th season. So from September to August of 2018 to 2019, I'm going to share with you exactly when they're going to be episodes of the podcast. As I just said, we did over 52 a year. We're going to scale that back to 30 a year, still a ton. And that's going to be dispersed evenly throughout the year, except for 2 months where we will not air any episodes at all for reasons that will make a lot of sense if you stop by on the 27th of August on the blog, thesimplyluxuriouslife.com, to find out why. And the other part of it, and I'm very excited to share this with you guys. So we are just starting to wrap up French Week, the 3rd annual. As I mentioned earlier this month of August, I'm very much an Anglophile as well. And it has been something that I've been unconsciously talking about on the blog. But not anymore. I am completely aware and very excited. And I know many of you guys are as well. So we can be both Anglophiles and Francophiles. Anyway, I'm going to have a Brit Week or a British Week in May of 2019, our first. So if you have any recommendations, or if you know a book or an author or a website or a shop or anything at all that you think would be a great idea for British Week for the Simply Luxurious blog, please email me as I start getting things rounded up for that, as I'm already starting that. I mean, I start French Week roundups. I've already started for French Week roundups for the 4th annual next August. So feel free to email me anytime something may come up. You never know. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in today, and have a lovely weekend, and good luck if you're entering the giveaways for this week's The French Week. Bonne journée. Thank you for tuning in to the Simple Sophisticate podcast, where intelligent living is paired with signature style. For more ideas and inspiration throughout the week, stop by the blog, thesimplyluxuriouslife.com, or pre-order Living the Simply Luxurious Life, Making Your Everydays Extraordinary and Discovering Your Best Self, which will be released on November 13th, 2018. You can also pick up my first book, Choosing the Simply Luxurious Life, A Modern Woman's Guide, which is now available in paperback as well as ebook and audio versions on Audible, iTunes, and Amazon, or wherever ebook and audiobooks are sold. To stay caught up on the most recent episodes of the podcast, blog posts, and to receive exclusive news as well as an extra dose of inspiration to jumpstart your weekend, subscribe to the Simply Luxurious Life's weekly newsletter, which arrives in your inbox each Friday to enjoy with a hot cup of tea or a morning cup of coffee. Until next Monday, I'm your host, Shannon Ables. Bonne journée.